Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with a few housekeeping items. So welcome everyone again to our K-CART research seminar. So just a few reminders for our talk today. We ask that everyone stay muted during the presentation just to limit background noises. You also have a couple options if you have questions during the talk. So you can either send questions that you have for the speaker over chat, and I will ask those directly to Dr. Ptomey at the end, and you can send those over the chat at any point. Or if you want to wait till the end of the talk, you can unmute yourself and ask your question yourself. I want to remind people that we have a couple more talks coming up. The next one I'll be sending out an invite tomorrow, which will actually be for my talk, which will be on November 5th. And again, you can find the schedule for the rest of the semester on our K-CART website. We also are starting to look for scheduling people for next semester, and I'm going to be sending out an email to you all before too long asking for volunteers. If you all are interested or know someone who might be interested in doing one of these talks next semester, you can respond to that email when I send it out, so just keep an eye out for that. You can also volunteer a friend if you prefer. All right, so to get into our speaker for today, so today we have Dr. Lauren Ptomey. So Dr. Ptomey got her PhD in medical nutrition science here at the University of Kansas Med Center, and she's now an associate professor in the Department of Internal Medicine at the KU Med Center. Her research has focused on using technology to promote weight management and physical activity in individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as individuals with Down syndrome and those with Alzheimer's disease. And then she's also interested in looking into how diet and physical activity impact body composition, cognition, and metabolism in those populations, and also how the use of technology can improve dietary intake assessments. So we're all very excited. She's obviously studying a diverse set of research across populations that are of high interest right now, especially to the NIH. So looking forward to this talk. And today she's going to be telling us about the use of remote delivery for weight management and physical activity interventions in individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Ptomey.
Thank you. All right. So I'll kind of get right into this. I have a lot of slides. I'm going to just kind of try to jump in. I won't talk too much. I think most individuals here on this call know what an intellectual and developmental disability is. So I kind of want to get straight into the problem. So we know the weight status of adults with IDD. They have greater rates of overweight and obesity compared to the general population. This is very similar in adolescents with intellectual and developmental disabilities, who about 50%, 50 to 60%, depending on your diagnosis, have overweight and obesity. So this is actually really interesting, a study which I know some of you on this call were involved in, but we decided to go ahead and look at the weight status of individuals here at KUMC using the Huron repository. And what we found was that about 50% of children, so those under 18 years of age, had overweight or obesity, and adults, it's up to 81%. If you go to individuals with autism or ASD, we're looking at 42% in kids and 62% in adults. And then if you go into the other IDDs, it's 34% and 62%. So why is this a problem? Well, what we've also found is that there's a lot of comorbidities related to individuals and individuals with IDD related to obesity. So if you look here, anything in the orange box has shown a relationship with weight. So across the board, sleep apnea is a large problem. Same with type 2 diabetes and hypertension. We know that the main contributors to weight in this population are kind of the same contributors we see in any population. So low consumption of fruits and vegetables, poor diet quality, high amounts of processed food, low physical activity. So it's kind of getting to the point of why something needs to be done. And the question becomes, why weight management? For anyone who kind of knows the weight management field or more the nutrition field, weight management is kind of a hot topic actually at the moment, because it's the ability of, do you really need to lose weight versus just focusing on healthy lifestyles. The problem really comes to individuals with IDD is that they are at a greater risk of comorbid conditions, and just healthy lifestyle doesn't seem to be enough because it can really take away from their independence. So for example, they have a high need, if they have diabetes and have a need for insulin, they might lose their ability to live alone. If they have a higher weight, there's the inability of staff to help transfer them and assist with those, especially with those with physical disabilities. So then they're having to be put into special homes. A lot of times if you're at a higher weight and you have aggression, there's more frequent staff overs and your quality of care is reduced. So only recently has the medical community really started to see the need for weight management for this population. So because of that, there's really not a whole lot of recommendations for weight management. So in terms of adults with IDD, there's only 22 trials that have looked at weight management, 95% of which were not conducted in accordance with current weight management guidelines, which recommend a multi-component approach. Overall, they reported about minimal weight loss, about 3%. We consider 5% weight loss clinically relevant or clinically significant, so it was lower than that. In adolescents and youth with IDD, it's a little bit less. There's only 10 trials that have looked at weight management in that population, 9 of which, again, were not conducted in accordance with current weight management guidelines. So when I say a multi-component approach, that means using caloric restriction, increased physical activity, and behavioral strategies. And typically they need to be at least 6 months in length to really see a change. So when we narrow it down to those studies that have looked at multi-component weight loss, we have them here. So there's a group in Scotland led by Craig Melville, and they have done quite a few studies using a conventional diet, most of which has led to some clinically significant weight loss. And then Richard and Muriel Saunders, who we started working with, who are from LSI back in the, I think, mid-2000s, started kind of creating this enhanced stoplight diet, which I'm going to really talk to you about more in general. And so we've done some work that has looked at both the enhanced stoplight diet and the conventional diet. So getting into it real quick, a conventional diet is basically what follows the USDA's guidelines for Americans, reduces energy intake, reduces portion sizes, tries to decrease saturated fat, increase fruits and vegetables. The real problem with following a conventional diet, especially in this population, is many times it requires calorie counting, reading nutrition labels, meal prepping, a lot of things that individuals with IDD really struggle with. Most of them are really reliant on a caregiver to do a lot of these things. So if they don't have that perfect caregiver support, they might not be able to do it. And they really make you have to comprehend education material. So what this enhanced stoplight diet is it basically enhances the original stoplight diet with portion control meals and fruits and vegetables. So the original stoplight diet categorizes food according to energy content. So red, yellow, and green, just like a stoplight. It has grade 1 evidence for its effectiveness in weight management. So just kind of what that means is low energy foods are going to be our foods that are low in energy density. So they're going to have less calories per gram. So basically you can eat more for fewer calories. You have your green foods, which are mostly like fruits and vegetables, your yellow foods, which are going to be like your lean dairies, lean proteins, and then red foods, which are going to be those foods that are high in energy content. So some of our like baked goods, full fat dairy, full fat meat. The original stoplight diet does have grade 1 effectiveness for weight management in children. And then we enhanced it with portion control meals. So these are things that are just basically high volume, low energy prepackaged meals that are convenient, decision-free, already made. Why we thought this would be really good in this population is because it doesn't really involve a lot of needing to read or make decisions or high level kitchen skills. So a lot of individuals know what color boxes they can look for at the store. They don't have to read the nutrition labels to try to figure out if it's a good choice. And then they can cook them themselves because all they have to do is put them in the microwave and take them out. They don't have to worry about cutting up foods or trying to cook using a stove. And they've also shown grade 1 evidence for their effectiveness in weight management. So this kind of gets along to the original NIH trial, which was an 18-month intervention that we wanted to look at both weight loss and weight management in adults with IDD, either randomized to this enhanced stoplight diet or conventional diet. All participants were had a monthly in-home meeting with a health educator. This lasted about 30 minutes, where that health educator will go over they would go over how they're doing with the program. They would fill out tracking sheets, which I'll show you shortly, and then kind of go over a education or behavioral component lesson. So our participants were 18 years of age or older. They had mild to moderate IDD. They had overweight or obesity as defined as the BMI over 25. They were excluded if they had insulin-dependent diabetes, any kind of special diets, Prader-Willi, or had recently lost weight. So these diet groups, like I said, were our enhanced stoplight diet and our conventional diet. And so they were given kind of materials we developed for this population. So the stoplight diet, like I said before, kind of categorizes all food to green, yellow, or red. And so they had two versions of it. So we had the original one that if someone had high literacy, they could easily read and see the colors. And then we also made a visual representation of it too, for those who whose literacy levels were not quite as high. Everyone was given weight charts, and so we could mark where their weight was at each month, and so they could start to see the trends if weight was going up or down. Everyone was asked to track their diet. So for those on the enhanced stoplight diet, we gave them these pictorial tracking sheets, so they would cross the foods out if they had a vegetable, a fruit, a shake, or entree, and then the different colors. There was also an area there for writing their steps, which we assessed via pedometer that were given for them. The conventional diet forms were very similar. For the conventional diet, we recommended a 500 calorie deficit based off of their estimated energy intake, and then we made them personalized sheets like this based on how many servings of each food group they should have for that calorie level. So they were all recommended servings of fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, and grains. Now, with the fruits and vegetables, we did recommend a minimum of 5 a day, but we actually told them that was just a minimum. They could have unlimited. For physical activity, like I said, they were given a pedometer, and we encouraged them to try to get 10,000 steps a day. For every 10,000 steps they got to cross off an X on the game board. And then every time they got to that 100,000 steps, they got a monetary incentive. So it was $5. They also got additional monetary incentives for tracking. So for crossing off their icons, they got about 5 cents per icon. And they got about $10 every time they went down in a BMI category. So a little bit about the results of this study. We consented 162, 149 were enrolled, 124 completed weight loss, and 101 completed the entire intervention. In general, our subjects were about 57% female, 83% non-Hispanic white, and education level kind of varied, but most had a high school degree. So looking at weight change between the two diet groups, we found that the enhanced stoplight diet led to clinically significant weight, about 7% at 6 months. It was statistically higher weight loss than the conventional diet. However, if you look at 18 months, they kind of evened out. So they were about the same. So the big takeaway was that both diets work and can produce clinically meaningful weight changes over time. Just the enhanced stoplight diet works a little bit quicker, while it seemed to take participants a little longer to get the hang of a conventional diet. Energy intake, we saw similar patterns, that there was a significant decrease in the enhanced stoplight diet over time. Physical activity, I'll get to in a minute, but we really didn't see any changes in physical activity, whether light or moderate. Actually, if you look at this lovely chart, they're moderate to vigorous physical activity, so that really good physical activity that we want decreased over the intervention. So kind of our takeaway from this original study is we found two diets that promoted clinically significant weight loss, one faster than the other, but we really still needed to find something to do in terms of physical activity. We need more cost-effective strategies, so I don't think I went into this very much, but in order to do these individual visits with each person, we had one of our health educators drive out to their house and meet with them. Our recruitment radius was 50 miles of either Kansas City or Lawrence. So we would have individuals in Topeka as well as people out near Blue Springs. And so one of our health educators, if they were doing, could spend, 3 hours meeting with one person. So it was very time consuming over time, plus the mileage. And then we also didn't know if these results would translate to younger populations. So this kind of key study led to the next series of studies I'm going to talk about. So the first one is our remote delivery of weight management for adults with IDD. In this study, what we were looking at is to see if this enhanced stoplight diet delivered remotely, so using iPads, would be non-inferior to our traditional face-to-face delivery, which we had done before. And so anyone in the remote delivery is given an iPad. We have health educator meetings over Zoom, just like this. They're asked to track their diet using an app on the iPad, Lose It, and they are given a Fitbit, which automatically tracks their physical activity. They're also given one of the Fitbit scales so they can track their weight remotely. Our face-to-face delivery is being done exactly like in the study I just described. This is a 24-month study, so we do a 6-month weight loss, a 12-month maintenance period, and then we're doing a 6-month no contact follow-up. So basically we disappear, come back 6 months later and see what happened. And they're getting those meetings individually. So the outcomes we're trying to collect are anthropometrics, energy and macronutrient intake, physical activity, personal well-being or quality of life, and then we're going to be doing a cost analysis. So currently the study is ongoing. We just finished recruitment this summer. So we have all, I think we ended up actually with 121 subjects. And 6-month weight loss will be done, I believe, in January. And then we'll have another 1.5 years before we're actually fully done with the study. The other study that this led to was weight management for adolescents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So in this study, what we kind of wanted to do with 2 things, and this we wanted to look at these 2 different delivery systems, doing it remotely, and then we also wanted to look at the 2 different diets. We hypothesized that remote delivery would probably be more acceptable in teenagers than having us come out face to face. We also thought it would be more cost effective. We also hypothesized the enhanced stoplight diet might do better in this population. So in this one, we originally wanted to do like a 4-arm design with using each of those combinations, using technology and enhanced stoplight diet technology and conventional diet, and then face-to-face with each of the diets. However, we would have needed, I think, like 250 people to be able to power that. And for all of you who do research, working with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we just didn't think that was going to be feasible in our area. So it actually became a 3-arm design in which we're able to compare delivery systems by looking at the usual care diet delivered both face-to-face and by remote delivery, as well as compare diets by looking at the remotely delivered enhanced stoplight diet versus the remotely delivered conventional diet. So this study is somewhat ongoing. However, we just finished our primary outcome, which was weight loss at 6 months over the summer. So I actually have some data for you guys to see. So for 6 months, we ended up with 110 individuals randomized into the 3 groups of the study, and 100 and I believe we had 8. I should know that number by now, but we have about 95% compliance. I believe we lost 6 people over the course of the intervention. Participants were again about only 52% female, 16 years of age, and about 81% were non-Hispanic white. We had about 50% of those with Down syndrome and about 39% of those who had autism. So at 6 months, what we saw is presented here. So the green line is our face-to-face conventional diet. The red line is our remotely delivered conventional diet, and the blue line is our remotely delivered enhanced stoplight diet. So what we found was there was clinically different weight loss between the enhanced stoplight diet and the conventional diet when delivered remotely, but there was no significant weight loss or statistically significant weight loss between the remote delivery and the face-to-face delivery of the conventional diet. However, the technology delivery did a little bit better. So in our intervention compliance, compliance was about the same between the three different intervention groups, and it was actually relatively high. So when looking at percent of sessions attended, on average, they attended about 82% of sessions. They tracked their diet about 78% of the time, and they tracked their physical activity about 75% of the time. What's actually kind of interesting is that the face-to-face group tracked higher physical activity. They actually were the ones who had to wear a pedometer and then write down what they did. The other group's tracking was classified as wearing their Fitbit because we automatically were able to get the data. So they just really didn't wear their Fitbit very much. So it's kind of interesting that the group that actually had to do a little bit more did a little bit better. Changes in physical activity, and I apologize, I just got these data earlier today, so I just threw them on there, and I have not had enough time to really memorize everything that happened. But what we saw was that steps increased significantly in each of the three groups. We didn't really see any changes in MBPA yet again. This face-to-face usual care group did have a change, what I would call a clinically relevant change in MBPA, about 10 minutes per day. However, this was also the self-report group. The other groups, their physical activity is tracked using the Fitbit accelerometers, and so it's a little bit more objective. So, I have to say I don't really know if they actually changed 10 minutes a day or not. So that the rest of the study, the maintenance aspect is still ongoing, and that study should be done in May. So we'll kind of have an idea of if these changes in weight kept up over the long term and into maintenance. So the kind of similar things that we saw in the two studies was this enhanced stoplight diet really seems to be better than a conventional diet, both in adults and in adolescents, and that we saw the remote delivery is feasible and may even have some benefits. So we kind of started thinking of what are we going to do then to get these individuals physically active. So this really gets into the other aspect of my research, which is the remote delivery of physical activity. So there's a lot of barriers to obtaining physical activity in individuals with IDD. On top of just the regular barriers to obtaining physical activity by anyone. But they really have some issues with transportation, so they a lot of times have to rely on a parent or if an adult, a care provider to drive them to a place for physical activity, getting individuals who are at the facilities. Very few are familiar with IDD, so sometimes they're uncomfortable with the equipment or they're uncomfortable training them or allowing them there. A lot of times there's few supportive peers or friends as activity partners, and it can just kind of be isolating. So the idea became, okay, well, what about like at-home workouts? That might be a little bit more feasible because then they don't have to worry about that transportation issue or the cost of a gym membership. However, some of the problems with those that I think anyone who's tried to do in-home workouts knows that they can get really repetitive and boring. There's no accountability or support and no workout partners. So the idea became like, can we use technology? And as we've seen in some of our other studies, that technology delivered interventions seem to be well acceptable in this population. So we started trying to pilot these remote physical activity sessions. And so we did physical activity sessions in groups of individuals conducted over Zoom. Now, we started this research, I think it was 2004, or 2014, about 5 or 6 years ago. So back then, no one was using Zoom compared to, today we all use it 20 times a day. So we did have to kind of teach everyone what Zoom was at the time. And at the time, it was a little bit more innovative. But the big thing about this was they didn't have to leave the house, but they could have that instructor support. They could have that feedback and accountability on how they were doing. They could get peer support from their friends. And then we could actually remotely monitor their physical activity to make sure they were staying in an appropriate heart rate range. So our first study we tried this in was a study in adolescents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we had a 12-week study in which we asked them to do these remote physical activity videos with us 3 times per week. We had about 5 to 7 participants per group. and they were done 3 times per week. So in that sample, they were about 14 years of age, again, about 50% female, about 41% with Down syndrome, about 39% with ASD. So a lot of our sessions had a warm up and a cool down. We could modify them individually based on a disability. So for example, we had some people who didn't like to get on the floor or couldn't get on the floor. And so we were able to modify it. If individuals had problems with balance or gait, we were able to give them chair exercises and have 2 instructors on there kind of at all times to be able to be kind of the regular version and the modified version. And then we were able to monitor their physical activity with some of the smartwatches. So here's an example video of one of these sessions. Right up here, we have Savannah, who's our health educator, who's leading this, and then everyone else is kind of following her along. And hopefully, I didn't test the sound out. I have my ear, let me turn my earphones off, I think. Right.
In between, we're dancing, we're throwing our scarves, we're tossing. Nice job, everyone's looking good. I'm gonna say, grab your scarf and sit down. Sit down. All right, get back up. Nice job. Erin, super fast. Nice job, Xavier. Everyone did good. Nice job. Trace, we're back up. Good job, everyone. Catch it, sit down. Drop it down fast. Wow, you guys are quick. Okay. Ready? Get back up.
Right, so that's just kind of a quick example. Sound keeps cutting out.
In between, we're dancing.
And that was one of the early ones. So typically they ramp up their intensity after that. So we kind of start slow and then get a little bit more intense as the week. Back in. It's the joy of Zoom. All right, so each of the sessions or weeks, we have different themes involved with. And so each theme we try to make a little bit more fun to make it more applicable. So we'll have like winter sports where their goals are going to be pretending they're sledding or skiing or throwing snowballs. Other weeks we might do more like game themed weeks or dance theme weeks. A lot of times we'll have individuals pick out what music they want to hear in the background. So they can kind of get involved. We've had a lot of people who want to choreograph their own dances and then share them with the group, and that is perfectly okay. And so sometimes we have the star of the week who gets to kind of make their own part of the physical activity intervention or physical activity lesson that week that they get to teach everyone else. So in the pilot, attendance was about 78%. So they attended about 2 out of 3 of the sessions on average, and it's kind of across the board. We didn't really have, there were only a couple of people who just really didn't attend very often. They got minutes of physical activity, about 27 minutes per session. Their heart rate was a little bit lower, so they were more in that low to moderate zone. However, given that there's some different issues with heart rate in individuals with Down syndrome, you know, we can't totally account for that. But some of the limitations with this pilot were that it was only 12 weeks in length. We didn't know when the intervention stopped. We don't know how it compares to other interventions. And we really didn't measure changes in MVPA because we could only get data from the smartwatches, which were just worn during the sessions. So that led to this current R01, individual and family-based interventions. And so this is actually an 18-month intervention, 12-month active, 6-month no contact follow-up, and adolescents with IDD. The original idea was to compare these remotely delivered physical activity sessions with kind of a usual care. However, once it got under the hands of our lovely study section at NIH, what they really wanted to see was not as much the intervention, but how do we get people to comply to their intervention? Because, you know, we really just delivered our pilot to adolescents, and they were saying, well, you know, it's not going to be successful unless you involve the parent. And that kind of came up with the idea of how much parent involvement is really needed, and does parent support really change individuals with IDD's physical activity and their compliance to an intervention. So in this study, everyone is randomized into two groups, one where the adolescent only is getting the physical activity intervention, and one where the adolescent and a parent is asked to do the intervention together. During that first 6 months, they are asked to do it 3 times a week or come to 3 sessions a week. In the subsequent 6 months, it goes down to once a week, so that's our maintenance period, and then they get a little bit more education for getting physical activity outside the lessons, and then we have a 6-month no contact period. The parent group also gets every other or twice a month education sessions where we meet with the parent and the adolescent. We can give them feedback on their physical activity data monitored by Fitbit, as well as like lessons about how to improve physical activity in the home, where to get physical activity, and just kind of education about why it's really important. They also have a Facebook group where parents can get on and get some tips and info and talk to each other if they want. So our outcomes for this study is really the main outcome is change in moderate to vigorous physical activity assessed over accelerometer in adolescents in both groups. We're also measuring that same outcome on parents just to see how parents are doing. We're also looking at change in motor skills, fitness, strength, grip strength, medications, quality of life, and then self-efficacy for physical activity and social support. And the parents were also looking to kind of find out about their time constraints and how much they feel like they're able to help their child with physical activity. So I'm going to kind of give you a hint on some of the results that we're seeing so far. So this is one of the parent videos. So in this one, the parents were asked to be there with their adolescents. And I realize you might not be able to hear that, but if you look, the main thing is how many parents do you actually see on there? And that's kind of what we're seeing overall with our parent group is parents aren't attending very, their attendance is a little bit lower. I think mean attendance right now is about 35% compared to adolescent attendance is about 70%. So even when asked to come to the parent group, the parents aren't really coming. And it's for 2 reasons. One, they don't seem to really have a lot of time, but more importantly, the adolescents, they're teenagers. They don't want them there. They don't want their parent working out with them, especially if they're going to be there on screen with other people. You know, it's just not cool. So that study, we are about halfway done with, a little bit more than halfway done with recruitment. We hope to finish recruitment in the spring of it, and then we'll have our primary outcome 6 months from then, and hopefully be done in about 2 years from now. The other study this led to, or the other pilot study we started doing, was to start to look at this in adults with Down syndrome. So for anyone that knows, a lot of people who work with individuals with Down syndrome already know this, but about 70% of adults with Down syndrome will develop early onset Alzheimer's disease. By the time of death, 90% of adults with Down syndrome will develop Alzheimer's disease. At least in the typically developing population, physical activity is shown to may help prevent dementia or improve cognitive function. It's really believed the link there is fitness. But only about 9% of adults with Down syndrome achieve the recommended 150 minutes of physical activity a week. So for us, this seemed like a great opportunity to try to increase how much physical activity adults with Down syndrome are getting. So we again wanted to see if these individuals would comply with our remote program. So we had a 12-week study in 30 adults with Down syndrome, and they were randomized to either do 1 or 2 group sessions per week, because we just wanted to see how much they would attend when asked to. They also got 15-minute individual education sessions per week with the health educator to really go over physical activity to kind of work with them on increasing their physical activity outside the sessions and just provide them feedback and really just support. They all measured their physical activity using Fitbit. They were given weekly homework. And for this, we also measured cognitive function using CanTab. What we saw was that adults with Down syndrome attended the sessions about 90% of the time, whether or not they were in one session or 2 sessions per week. They attended the individual sessions about 80% or 83% of the time. And we tried to give them homework at the time, which was they had to like take a video of them doing whatever they were prescribed that week. So it might have been like jumping jacks or steps, and they had to film themselves and upload it on the iPad. And that was a disaster, as you can see. They didn't do it very often. I think a lot of people just didn't want to film themselves doing things. And on average, they were getting pretty high in BPA in these sessions. So if they got 1 session per week, they were getting about 26 out of the 30 minutes, and that transferred over. So if they got 2 sessions per week, they were getting an additional 60 minutes of physical activity. What was interesting is when we looked at the cognitive changes, we saw moderate effect sizes, moderate to high effect sizes, and the paired associate learning variables, which really kind of measure memory. So we saw that, even just 12 weeks of what I would call relatively light physical activity, so 60 minutes per day, or an additional 60 minutes of physical activity a week, seemed to result in pretty good cognitive changes in such a short period of time. So that led to the currently ongoing intervention, which is the promotion of physical activity for prevention of Alzheimer's disease in adults with Down syndrome, or as we lovingly call, brain power. So this is a 12-month intervention in 80 adults with Down syndrome. They're randomized to 3 groups, so either a remote high group where they're asked to attend the sessions 3 times a week, a remote low group where they attend once a week, or usual care where they just basically get a personal health educator who meets with them twice a month and just kind of talks them through how to get physical activity on their own. Everyone gets that Fitbit for self-monitoring. Everyone gets a Fitbit for self-monitoring. So the outcomes we're looking on this are in BPA, so changes in moderate to vigorous physical activity. We're also looking at that cognitive function using CanTab assessments, cardiovascular fitness by doing a maximal treadmill test, quality of life, and then we're doing some neuroimaging to look at changes in structure and function of the brain to kind of see how this might affect Alzheimer's disease. So they're getting both just a structural imaging, a functional imaging. We're also looking at arterial spin labeling to look at blood flow to the brain. And then we're also looking just kind of at overall feasibility, so retention, session attendance, and safety. So far, this study is ongoing. Our first cohort of 20 is just completed their six months of the intervention. So did 6 months testing in August, and they'll be done in February. And we're currently doing baseline testing on our second cohort of individuals. So we're really excited to see what's going. Intervention compliance is really high. They attend about 90% of lessons. We actually have a problem with them attending too much. So in our remote high, where they're supposed to come 3 times a week, we actually had to offer 6 lessons a week because to give everyone their availability and time of when they were available. Well, after COVID hit, a lot of people have more available time, and they really wanted to be social with their friends. So although they were only supposed to come to 1 time slot, they learned they could come to 2 of them. And so we're actually trying to get them to stop, which I never thought was going to be a problem, is getting people or telling people they can't exercise, but it is what it is. So kind of our conclusions with this are individuals with IDD have low levels of PA, they have unique barriers, and there's very few home-based interventions to promote physical activity. We think parent-based behavior interventions could help, although we're kind of seeing maybe not. We know that group lessons delivered remotely may promote increased PA, and hopefully we'll know when these studies are done if that's true or not. And we'll also know the sustainability of these physical activity changes. So quickly, just want to acknowledge all the funders who have funded my research in the past, especially acknowledge my team at the Center for Physical Activity and Weight Management, and then all the families who always agree to participate in our studies and some of the sub-studies I didn't get to talk to today. So I know I just presented a lot of information in a very little amount of time, but I wanted to make sure there would be time for questions. So I'm gonna stop talking for a minute and turn it over to you guys to ask your questions.
Thanks so much, Lauren. That was a lot of data. That was fantastic. And I mean that as a true compliment. You guys are very productive. So yeah, let's open it up to questions in the audience. And you can please feel free to either unmute yourself or use the raise hand icon in Zoom. If I'm not seeing any questions, I'm going to jump in then because I have a
question.
Sorry, go ahead.
So we know that a lot of the individuals in these populations use psychoactive medications, and a lot of those medications have the side effect of weight gain. I'm wondering if your studies control for that, or if you see effects of these interventions that are effective in people who are taking medications that cause weight gain.
Sure. So in that first study we did, the weight loss study in adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we did go back and look at the psychoactive medications. So we classified all drugs as obesogenic versus non, and really our case for obesogenic drug are ones that promote weight gain, were any of the SSRIs and the antipsychotics. We saw that there was no change in weight loss between those taking the drugs and those not. So although we know that they might promote weight gain in these populations, it doesn't seem to inhibit them or prevent them from losing weight.
So Lauren, I wanted to know a little bit more about who these individuals in the studies are. And that is to say, I mean, it's, you know, one piece of that is one of the major challenges with individuals participating in exercise programs with IDD, or anybody really, it seems to me is getting them motivated and maintaining that motivation. And you have really impressive retention rates and participation rates, but how do those individuals get into the study? Like, is this a representative sample? Because that is one of the major challenges out there in that regard. And then I guess secondary to that is then I think multiple samples that you showed were included individuals with Down syndrome and individuals with autism. And I'm curious about whether both your thoughts on whether there are different motivators and different levels of efficacy for those two groups, and whether there's differences in terms of their the way you structure the sessions for those two groups.
Yeah, sure. So I'll kind of go back to the first one of who these people are, where do we find them, are they representative? So our recruitment strategies have always really been community-based. I think a couple of you have probably been on calls or talks with me where I'm like, help me get the word out here. We're trying to recruit and just getting to the different groups. We recruit a lot of people through the Down syndrome base, through the Down Syndrome Guild. I think we've kind of built a good partnership with them over the years. We have a partnership with, we know a lot of people who work for the Autism Society of Kansas City. We get them through. We've got people through clinics over at Children's Mercy on both their Down syndrome clinic and the Special Needs Weight Management Clinic has done some recruitment, as well as a lot of different email listservs. Our biggest way we recruit people is typically is word of mouth. You know, as we all know, these communities are very interconnected. So if you can get one person involved, a lot of times they tell it to their friends and we get more. The thing about, I guess, what's really helped us is a lot of times once they're enrolled in one study, they're kind of like on our mailing list for other studies. So are they representative? It depends. You know, obviously the only people we know of are people who are willing to sign up for one of these programs. We can't just pull people out of the blue and be like, okay, try to do physical activity. So it has to be someone who either themselves or their caregiver or their parent wants them to be in a weight loss intervention, or wants them to look at that, or wants them to try to get more physically active. And then many times, you know, we have the same people who have been in multiple studies because they, you know, we form a relationship, they really like one. So someone who has maybe already done a lot of people who were in the physical activity pilots ended up in one of the weight management studies, or vice versa. you know, that's kind of who they are. In terms of controlling for the different diagnoses. So again, just because this is the study that's completely done and we've done all the analysis for that first weight loss study I talked to, looking at enhanced stop-by diet versus conventional diet, we did go through and we pulled out those with Down syndrome and then compare it. We did a propensity match-based scoring to compare them to individuals with similar variables who were non-Down syndrome, whether they had ASD or other IDDs. We did not control that out, but we did find that there were no significant differences between weight loss, both at loss 6 months and at maintenance 18 months. They had very similar changes to physical activity and diet as well. We've also seen, at least in our physical activity studies, this one's a little bit different, that the individuals with Down syndrome are actually more compliant than the ones with ASD. And I can't really, you know, tell you why. I think they have a little bit more fun with it, but again, that's just very anecdotal. And a lot of that hasn't been published yet. But you can also just even see it in the attendance rate. So between the two studies in our what we call J-Live, so our currently ongoing study for adolescents with IDD, they're attending about 70% of the time, compared to in our adult study, with just Down syndrome, they're attending about 90% of the time. I think one of the big factors, though, between those two studies is not really the diagnosis of Down syndrome only, plus Down syndrome, ASD, and other IDDs, but it's the age group. So, you know, adolescents have a lot more commitment. Sometimes they're a little bit more unwilling to do things. And then I think, you know, especially during COVID times, some of the adolescents are still able to be in school and see peers, and they have a little bit more Zoom fatigue. Well, some of our adults with Down syndrome, they don't actually have a whole lot of activities anymore. And so for them, this is something really special and something they like to come to. A lot of that's just kind of more anecdotal, but, you know, that's one thing we're constantly hoping to do as we continue to do more analysis of these larger studies as they come out, is be able to kind of look at it by diagnosis, see what's different, and see if like the interventions need to be tailored to, you know, one group or the other.
Dr. Ptomey, we have a question I got over the chat about whether you saw gender differences. It looked like you had a pretty good gender split there for some of them. Did you see any, or did you look at gender differences for the efficacy of across your studies?
Yeah, so in the first RO1 that's done, we didn't see any gender differences between males and females. For the adolescent weight loss study, which we just finished 6 months, I don't have that data yet. I actually just asked the statistician for that earlier this week, so hopefully I'll be able to tell you that shortly. And our pilot studies, I think, actually, I don't know if I put the slide with the gender on sex differences on there, but no, we didn't see any difference between males and females.
Lauren, I have one more question, kind of related to my initial one, though. But I am curious. I mean, so these programs are really nicely structured to individuals with IDD. Within the IDD spectrum, do you see strong relationships with IQ, such that effectiveness changes when you go below IQs of 40, or maybe more functional abilities are predictive of whether individuals will respond? Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I can. We actually most of the time don't enroll individuals with severe IDD. We just didn't think that it would be appropriate for them. Most of the time they have a stronger reliance on a caregiver, and we really wanted to more empower individuals to do things on their own. And then in physical activity, it's the same thing. They would have, it was just a higher risk due to, like, a lot of times with the severe IDD came more physical impairments. However, when I look at, if we've divided it out a couple times into more of that mild to moderate, so putting that cutoff, I believe it's what, 55 to be the cutoff, and look to see mild versus moderate. We've actually seen that moderate range, at least in terms of weight loss, did a little bit better. Again, it was not statistically significant, clinically significant, I would say yes. They seem to be a little bit more compliant. I think a lot of times that's because they are more aware, they're more reliant on a caregiver, or it seems that they're not, once they're a little hesitant to change at first, but once they change, you know, they're much more what we would say like routine based. And so it's just like, this is what I eat now. This is when I do my physical activity now. And it just becomes like part of their daily habits compared to, I think, some of the ones who are a little bit more high functioning, have a little bit more resistance, or they're doing more things on their own. You also have, a lot of times they might have other jobs or other things in the community. Again, some of that's anecdotal, some of that's based on the evidence. But that's just kind of a little bit of what we're seeing. However, I would say in general, it seems to kind of work across the IQ spectrum.
Sure, makes sense. Becca, did I see you turning on your sound to ask a question? I'm not calling out people in the audience, but I thought Becca showed up, and I just want to make sure I hadn't interrupted her.
Yeah, Becca just, oh, sorry, you want to ask it yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay, sorry, my internet's acting up, so I sent it to Shannon. But my question is, for those people who are really motivated by the social aspect of these group sessions, when you go to the no contact period of the study, what do you expect to see?
Yeah, so that's what's going to be interesting. I would say, you know, I guess we kind of expect it to decrease. Our goal was really that if we could get people involved in physical activity, excited about it by using the social aspect, by giving them higher self-efficacy for physical activity, it would help them do more outside of it. But especially what we're seeing in the Down syndrome population is when it's so social, it's like, I think, really driven by that social need and the want for them to come together and be together. I'm guessing once they go into no contact, they're going to decrease their physical activity. But that's the one good thing about how we've really set up these studies is we've tried to set them up to be able to kind of go into dissemination. So everything that we've used when creating these, we try to do things that anyone can get. So we don't use any customized apps. We don't use anything that, you know, you or I or my neighbor next door can go, everything, you know, is something you can go buy from the store. Anyone can get a Fitbit, anyone can use Zoom. We've made arrangements with different organizations to be able to provide these lesson plans. And so online and nationally, that way anyone can be able to deliver this intervention. And that's also why we're measuring costs. So that way we can give groups kind of an idea of how much it's going to cost. So really our hopefully goal, the next step with all of these studies will eventually be a larger dissemination project and just working directly with different care organizations to be able to, you know, teach them how to do this and start piping it in. That way we don't have to do it anymore, and we've shown it works, and hopefully then we can keep people up without them being in a research study.
Great. I'm not sure we have, do people have any other questions to ask Dr. Ptomey while we have her attention? If not, we can round it up. All right. So Lauren, thanks again for doing this. This is really sort of an area that we haven't hit on at all in our seminar series, but also one that I think should be of significant interest to a lot of people on this this call, especially some of the investigators over here in Lawrence who are working with similar populations, and these kinds of interventions can clearly offer a lot of potential impact for some of the adolescents that we're interacting with. So thank you for doing it. Thank you for the presentation and your time, and we hope to see you all again soon. And again, I think our next speaker is Shannon on November 5th, so hopefully we'll see you then. Thanks again, Lauren. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Take care.